Thank you, Jeanette, for that wonderful meditation. We could stay in that space, and maybe we can, because it'll help us understand today's talk possibly a bit better. I've called it Understanding Understanding. Not very original, but it seemed to make sense for me. I know there's a couple of places like Wagga Wagga, same word twice, and there's a few others I can't think of at the moment. But understanding, understanding, there's two ways. Do we understand understanding? The dictionary reveals that the words wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and intelligence are closely related. From the book of Proverbs. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. And I think we've all heard the story, or those who've been brought up in Sunday school, reading the Bible, and those wonderful stories of King Solomon. In the beginning of Solomon's reign as king over Israel, divine presence appeared to him. I like that. Divine presence, that's another name. We always look for different names for God, Spirit, whatever it is. But divine presence seems to fit. I feel it over me as I say it. And I notice, as I put here, in the beginning of Solomon's reign, I think it was before, when he was young, that was the saying, when divine presence appeared. And, you know, whatever we call this great spirit, it can cause mayhem sometimes. When people say to me, you know, do I believe in God? I say yes, but I'll explain to you what my perspective is, because sometimes we're not all on the same position with it. My fabled Linton pub, I usually go in there occasionally to say hello to a few people. It's nice to get together in a country town. And there's a lady there who, she goes to the Anglican church up on the hill, just round from me. And she said, what's this stuff you're into? I thought, well, where do I begin? And I said, oh, we believe, you know, in the one presence. I'm not into that. I said, oh, well, you know, it's not a good place in the pub to talk about things like this. I said, I'm feeling thirsty. Anyway, she said, I believe God is a woman. I thought, very good, that's fine. I didn't say I believe God is a man, but as we know, it can be a bit unbalanced. I'm going to get onto that in a minute, but how we define God and how we are expressing God says more than any definition. Solomon asked for wisdom. He said, God said, ask what I should give you. And Solomon said, give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart. It pleased the divine presence that Solomon had asked for this. And I'm going to read the rest of this. Because you have asked this and not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but you have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Now I do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. Here's the other bit. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, all your life. No other king shall compare with you. Now, Solomon was very wise, but when we look back at the Old Testament, some of the things that would shock us today were quite normal then. As we know, Solomon had a huge harem. And, you know, he liked the good life, but he was a wise king. Later, this is echoed in the New Testament, Matthew 6, verse 33. Strive first for the kingdom of God, consciousness, and its righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. And to me, that makes sense. I don't know how often we have to be told, but secular and spiritual teachers have from ancient times revealed to us there are at least two ways of getting understanding. We can go our own way and we can learn from the trial and error that brings, the mayhem it brings, or we can go in and listen to that divine presence, still small voice, whatever it is, that lets us know what to do. But do we do it? We've all had that experience where we've been doing something and something inside us says, don't go that way, the road's going to be busy. But we go that way anyway. And I think I told the story once about I had a heap of cassettes like this, and I was doing a community radio show and I was walking down the steps. I hadn't got them done properly, down a heap of steps, and something inside me says, put some of them down and come back later. Well, I didn't. So I finished up all over the steps of the town hall with my CDs. I didn't listen. And another time I left something at the newsagents. Go back and get it. That one I did because it was my wallet. And we've all had an experience, what a horrible experience is not finding your wallet. Okay, in our school days, each year, sometimes we had, or sometimes every term, we had examinations. That used to put the fear of God into me. All the subjects we've been studying, we'd have to sit down for a couple of hours and go through, and they would possibly from this find out whether we'd absorbed it or whether we needed more help. I started school at the age 4 because my mother was tired of me running around the house, so she knew the headmaster. So I've always had, when I get to heaven, I'm going to mention this again to her. So I started at grade 4 and I had to repeat a year. I repeated grade 6 before I went into the first year of high school. So they understood where I was coming from. Mind you, it was quite valuable being that extra year. But I was slightly slow with some subjects, not with music or with art. And quite often I'd get into trouble. I'd walk past the piano and I couldn't resist playing a note. And the teacher didn't like this. You know, and you think, well, for goodness sakes, when you look back at your life, that was what I was going to be doing for 50 to 60% of it is playing music. But anyway, that's what you have to conform. And do you remember what it was like before we understood computers? My God, the mayhem. I remember our first Zoom. I was a nervous wreck. And then I think we had Diane Barry here and she said, well, okay, you can unmute. And everyone's going, help, how do I do that? How do I unmute? How do I turn the video off? And I look at the people here now, and I'm very proud of them, especially you, Reverend Sylvia. She knows how to mute, and she knows how to turn the video off. And there's Robin Wren. You're coping very well, Robin, I can see that. And there's the others there. There's Catherine, of course, she's pretty technical on all these things now. And Mariam's there. Hello, Mariam. You've got the technology down to a fine art. So, in my research for today's talk, I surmise that there appears to be 3 steps to understanding understanding. First, it has to be perceived. Then we've got to accept it. Then it's got to be applied, which is also the 5th unity principle. It's all right knowing all this stuff, but if you don't do it, forget it. It's no good to it. In our spiritual understanding, we begin with what we have. Now, we've all read our first spiritual book, and I've said it a couple of times that one of the first ones that got me was one of Catherine Ponder's books. I'd studied yoga books and things like that before, but when I read, I think it was the Prospering Power of Prayer or something like that, is an interesting title, but I just got there and I just was riveted. Now, we've all had a first book. Can you remember what yours was, Rosemary, that got you going? Wasn't she easy to read? The Enid Blyton of New Thought. You know, she was just so eloquent. Glenda, what about you? Deepak Chopra, ageless body, timeless mind. Does it work? Yes. Was that a yes? Well, look at us. We're a youthful bunch. Sheila, you're not getting away with it. Can you remember one? You can't. No, what one would you say did impress you? Yeah. Emily Cady, you can't go past lessons in truth. And there's a chapter in that book called Spiritual Understanding. I've done that book about 4 times with 4 different people, and there's always something in it. I don't care how old-fashioned it is. The truth is the truth. So we use whatever got us going, but then we apply it, and here we learn affirmations, denials, and also just plain meditation, just sitting, contemplation and meditation. We're all born perfect, but we may not be expressing that perfection fully just yet. But that's all right, because we're getting better and better. Now, all the teachings of humankind, or of Jesus, were and still are, and we mention here the Jesus teachings, not the teachings about Jesus. They were for the purpose of leading us into the consciousness of oneness with God. But God has to start with, we have to start with what we've got. And in Jesus' time, as probably now, there are a lot of people, if they're not well fed or housed, they're not interested in any of this spiritual stuff. This is why it's wonderful that we see food banks in country towns. We've got one in my little town. And for a while we had something here, and there's others going about. It's come across at a huge level now. People are more aware. It's not just affirming for me, it's about affirming for everyone. And those last 2 years have certainly got that lesson to us. No one is an island unto themselves, is that saying. So Jesus spoke to them in parables, little stories that applied to their daily life. But most of these parables had a deeper meaning, and seeds were sown. And I often think of when the young children gathered around Jesus and the disciples were a bit stern, said, look, leave him alone, he's tired, all that. Jesus said, bring them forth. And I wonder what Jesus said to them. Must have been incredible, the seeds that were sown in those young minds. Not only from a spiritual, religious point of view, but also from a secular point of view, the spiritual teachings get out there. Some of the songs that we hear over and over again have a message in them, and some don't. But there are some ones over the years that were featured here. You Raise Me Up. What's another one that's got a really good message in it? What the world needs now is love. And there's more and more coming to us all the time. But, I realise now that Aesop's Fables, I'm sure some of you have a copy of that somewhere, the Ruby out of Omar Khayyam. And when I was in the States for the International New Thought Alliance conference, there was a lady there that specialised in telling us the spiritual side, the metaphysical side of Alice in Wonderland. I've got the book. It's wonderful. I've given it away actually to some children. And the other one is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. These have esoteric meanings, and the big one is The Wizard of Oz. That was written by someone from the Theosophical Society in Boston. He knew what he was doing. So there we go. That's The Wizard of Oz. And when I went over there to this conference in Denver, I said, I'm the boy from Oz. It didn't go down too well. Either they didn't know Peter Allen, or they didn't know that Oz is short for Australia. Anyway, these are external steps. We apply the teachings we know. But they were the simple truth. And it never stops being simple, but we have to prepare it in a way for people to understand it. Jesus said, I still have many things to show you, but you cannot bear to hear them now. He told them of the Comforter that is in all of us, and which would, in the fullness of time, show them the kingdom of heaven within themselves. The kingdom of love, power, and life. So as our understanding expands, so does our consciousness. As our understanding expands, so does our consciousness. Charles Fillmore, who often stated, and you've heard this, I resolve the right to change my mind. And how often do we have to do that? When we hear another point of view or someone has illuminated something to us. Intellectual understanding comes first in our soul's development, then a deeper understanding of the principles follow. There is in humanity, in us, a knowing capacity that transcends our intellectual knowledge. And when we discover this flow of thoughts, which seems to come independently, that still small voice, divine presence, when this happens, we can give thanks, know we are making progress, and that it is a sign that our heart or feeling center is opening. Understanding or the conscious realization of the effect of combining head and heart is when we give birth to the gift of God within us. This has got nothing to do with gender, but the intellect has been called masculine, representing the thinking and doing. The heart is the feeling center, which is the feminine side. So metaphysically, when both work together, we get what is called the mystical marriage. Maybe called different things in some different places. So I had to smile when this woman said, oh, God is a woman. And she said, someone gave me a book a few years ago, just made it so clear to me that God is a woman. And to me, that sounded just as unbalanced as God is a man. So we're not talking about gender. In between each of our genders, we all have these sides to us. And we have to combine them. In Matthew 6, verse 22, we read, the light of the body is the eye. Therefore, if thou think thy eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. And it's interesting in our power of the month, which is understanding, the position in the body for understanding is the front brain. Yogananda calls this the Christ conscious center we're talking about between the eyes, the secret door to divinity. I love that. The secret door to divinity. And 500 years before the birth of Jesus, Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching says, when male and female combine, all things achieve harmony. 1945, they discovered the Gospel of Thomas, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which that book was one of them. And Thomas, the power of the disciple of the month, says, when you make the two into one, you will become children of humanity. And finally, the truth was shown to me in probably first year of high school. Some of you know the poet Robert Browning. We had to study these poets. It wasn't a great joy for me, but I did it, and I'm so glad I did. From one of his poems, and he was 1812 to 1889. Robert Browning says, truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things. Whatever you may believe, there is an inmost center in us. The disciple of the month is Thomas, often called Doubting Thomas, because he wanted proof that Jesus had risen from the dead. When he was convinced, Jesus said to him, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. Well, I don't know about you, but I do like some sort of proof for different things. I like to see how they work out. And from the Gospel of John again, we read that Jesus called Thomas over to one side. They're all chatting, and can you imagine, one disciple comes over, the rest are there wondering what's going on. Jesus called him over and privately conveyed to him 3 things. Unfortunately, we don't know what they are. But when Thomas returned, the other disciples said to him, what did he say? What did he say? And he answered them, saying, in effect, that they were not ready to hear what Jesus had told him in confidence. And that goes back to that other verse I said. There are some things that we are not ready for. But over the centuries, I wonder if people are ready to hear these 3 things. 1. There is one presence and one power in the universe, and we are that power in expression according to our understanding of it, and what a responsibility that is. Who wants to hear that? We want someone else to take the blame. It's us. We are it. Another Thomas Troward, from his book, The Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science, it's a bit heavy going, but I'm finding it easier now. In case we get too carried away that we've got all this power, we can do what we like, he writes, the individual mind is not the creator of the power, but the distributor of it. Number 2. Some are still of the opinion that God is out there somewhere, and they rely on the authority of a minister, a priest, a rabbi, or someone else. Well, it's up to us now to go within. Number 3, we now understand the saying of Jesus, who said, when 2 or more are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. That saying, well, the time has come for that saying. Here it is. We have our intention circle. The power of combined prayer is amazing. Some of us here studied the book, Lynn McTaggart, The Power of 8, which goes into detail of the process. It's so good to have an intention circle, and also to go with other people that are praying. I've been to quite a few interfaith groups where it really doesn't matter what our individual beliefs are. Together we are praying. And in our meditation this morning, we heard that Jeanette was saying that somewhere around the world, people are praying at this moment. They are praying for peace, whether it's here, around the other side of the world, doesn't matter. And it always reminds me of, in Dublin, there was a lady there who said that there's a place there, a nun actually. I got off this bus in Dublin, and this nun, she wasn't actually dressed like one, but she was from one of the convents. And we were chatting for a while. She didn't know that I was interested in spiritual topics, but I was just there to see the sights. And she said, oh, our little convent down the road, we've got someone praying 24 hours a day. So is Silent Unity. And so have some of the other churches and spiritual centres around the world. So to sum up, speaking of books and things, in the 70s or 60s, there was a film and a book called Look Back in Anger. Well, I believe that when we look back, and we often do, we can be gentle with ourselves. Because that had to happen for this to happen. One thing I don't tell too many people is that on the way to spiritual unfoldment, the past comes very clear, and you think, oh my goodness, we shudder at some of the things we do. And you get more of that and more. But there's a way to understand it and accept it. Look back and see, that was me when I was there. And this is me when I'm now. Thank you, Spirit, for keeping me here. You can look back in understanding. And there's a prayer called the Ho'oponopono prayer, some of you may know. I find that wonderful when sometimes I might be thinking of something, I think, ooh, gee, I'll do that different. And I quietly say that prayer 10 times. Along with other prayers, I've got some very good prayers I use for different occasions, some traditional, some spiritual, some like Catherine Ponder, some from Ernest Holmes. There's something there to suit every occasion. So I believe when we look back, as we do, we can be gentle with ourselves. We can look back with understanding of how these experiences have helped us understand understanding. So be it. Thank you.